Need your daily fix on mixed martial arts?
We're going to kind of recap Bellator 155.
From UFC 198.
Who's who?
Kind of a controversial decision.
And who's not?
I couldn't figure out why, and then it hit me.
Well, don't you fret, because Golden State Media Concepts got you covered. Get your daily dose of MMA podcasts. Everything from the UFC, Bellator Fighting Championships, Extreme Cage Fighting, Invicta Fighting Championships, and so much more. Join us as we talk about some of the biggest names in mixed martial arts. We've got you covered here on Golden State Media Concepts MMA Podcast.
Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC MMA Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Arnel De Leon, and hopefully you're doing good for yourself, you're fine, you're healthy, your friends and family are all fine and healthy, whether you live internationally or in the States, you are perfectly healthy, and you are doing your best to survive through this huge pandemic of the COVID-19 being a huge issue in pretty much everyone's daily lives. So, while we're going through a time of uncertainty, the UFC, which was a for sure thing, there was some certainty going on for a brief moment in time for the Ultimate Fighting Championships. Now it has gone to uncertainty yet again, as UFC 249 has been cancelled. We've been discussing UFC 249 for the better part of a month now. Is it going to happen? Is it not going to happen? And every single time there's news coming out of it that a fighter dropped out, or there's a fighter being stuck in another country, or fighters are challenging other fighters because of the COVID-19 issue. With states going to lockdown, cities going to lockdown, some countries going through a lot more bigger issues, and America retaliating. Overall, it's very difficult to gauge on the activities of sporting events from even happening in the first place. If you don't know, the NBA season just got canceled. For the past month, it's been discussed. When will the season resume? When will the season resume? When will the season resume? Is it going to resume in May? Is it going to resume in June? Is it going to resume in July? Is it going to resume in August? We always have somebody, like a figurehead from a sports organization. In the NBA sense, we have Adam Silver. And for the UFC, we got Dana White. And for Adam Silver, who's like who I really believe is the best commissioner in the entire world of all of sports, no, without a doubt. Adam Silver is always pushing back by a month or two when it comes to announcing that the NBA season would continue on. So last month, at one point he said, "Oh, it's going to happen in the middle of April. Oh, it's going to resume in the beginning of May. It's going to resume in the beginning of July. It's going to resume by the beginning of August." So 2 weeks ago, Adam Silver said, "Oh, the NBA season is going to resume yet again in the beginning of May." But at this current moment in time in the States, it's very unlikely it's going to be happening in May. And through UFC 249, we now know that Dana White says that all future events have been canceled for the UFC. So it is it's very likely that the NBA will not resume its season through the by May. And the reason why I'm bringing up the NBA when it comes to discussing the UFC is because there's a lot more money being floating around through NBA, through their huge bargain build, huge deals when it comes to like television and internationally. There's just a lot more money going through the NBA more than the Ultimate Fighting Championships. And so if there's one organization that's going through a lot more complications through its standings of economics and it comes to planning of events, there's also a lot more events happening within the NBA spectrum, and there's a lot of major events that are supposed to happen within the timeline throughout the year for the National Basketball Association that's supposed to happen. But because like March Madness was supposed to be a big thing for scouts to analyze for the new players, we're supposed to go through the draft, we're supposed to go through a lottery, we're supposed to be going through like summer camp free agency. There's a lot of stuff that happens within the NBA in the future sense. Like for the UFC, if there's an event that's happening, then there's an event that's happening. If there's an event that's going to happen like in 2 months from now, alright, the event's going to happen 2 months now. NBA, it plans out everything it does for several years in advance. And it's not just impromptu. By the way, we got this fight happening in this Sunday, yeah. NBA does a lot of stuff happening in advance for their events. So you got to keep up with the NBA and how they handle their situation when it comes to looking at the UFC. Just because for the UFC, a lot of UFC is very spontaneous. And I think during this time, there has to be a lot of like pre-planning or future planning involved during this situation in the States when it comes to COVID-19. There's a lot of like afterthought thinking. For Dana White, I always had the idea that Dana White is thinking, oh, let's just think about the now. That's how I'm always seeing it though. Adam Silver is thinking, okay, what's going to happen in December for the NBA? What's going to happen in the 2021 December? Like for the NBA, there's a lot of things that has to happen within the NBA for it to be considered a true healthy season, i.e. thinking 4 years in advance. When it comes to UFC, it's like, hey, let's have a really awesome fight card that we're making right now for next Sunday. It's so impromptu, so spontaneous. I understand that's how the UFC has always worked for the longest time, and that nothing is built up in a year advance ever. We got some stuff being built up in just 2 weeks time. Justin Gaethje versus Tony Ferguson was a fight that's being built up just 2 weeks time, or it's only a week. It's a week. It's a week up to 2 weeks time of build up between these two people in a feud that it's so complicated right now with the UFC, and so that's why Dana White, when he announced UFC 249 officially being canceled, a part of me was a little bit shocked, but a part of me was also not really. So it was announced here by CBS Sports and other different news sites that in a matter of days, UFC 249 went from a state of uncertainty to scheduled to postponed. With Thursday's confirmation from UFC President Dana White that he had even scratched that he said that Disney, along with ESPN, the higher ups, the highest of highest ups, told Dana White, no, it's not going to happen. The event was originally scheduled to take place on Saturday, April 18, at an undisclosed location. Also, we got to know here that that there was no location that was official. For the UFC 249 event. All we know is that there will be an island, and now we don't know where the island's going to be at. But there's a lot of mystery involved with the UFC and its placement of fights. Even though we were about a week away from UFC 249, here's one of the troubling parts, because when Dana White did the interview when he was discussing, whenever Dana White was discussing UFC 249, there was a plethora of like comments, whether it be through YouTube, whether it be social media, whether it be Instagram. They're constantly bagging on Dana White. And the reason why a lot of people bag on Dana White, and some of it, and there's a reason why a lot of us, including me, kind of bag on Dana White actually. It's because he comes in with so much confidence that if he doesn't make do with his promises, then we kind of have to take a jab on him because he insults the media and he insults generally everybody all the time about this. There was one brief instance when during his interview with ESPN MMA where Dana White kind of broke character just for a wee bit, because a part of me believes that Dana White does play a kind of a character, or he puts on a mystique about himself when he's on camera. And that he's this really confident guy who can do anything. He's super good. He's super good at his own job. And then I'm not saying he's not bad at his job. I'm just saying he tries to play himself up a lot when the camera's on him, and he tries to be more outlandish or more a little more outspoken when the camera's on him. And so there's a moment in the interview where the interviewer was asking him, "Hey, you said this, and now what's happening here?" When Dana White says, when sporting events are going to happen, Dana White promises that the UFC will be the first sporting event to reopen. So yeah, and then the ESPN interviewer told him, okay, Dana White, you said it's going to be the first sporting event that's going to come back. Tell me, when is it going to come back then? And then Dana White, within just you can see it, just 2 seconds, where he kind of choked up his own throat. He's like, where it's really think about it. He lost eye contact of the interviewer and the camera for just a brief 2 seconds there. He started stuttering a wee bit, and then he went back to full on Dana White mode, being like, "Oh man, UFC events are definitely going to happen. I can't tell you when actually. Now we have all things planned out. We had multiple events we had multiple locations that were prepped up, that were being signed off by an actual official committee to look over UFC 249, but he still doesn't announce that, or he never really went specific on the announcement of that. Man, it's really difficult. I understand that I commend Dana White for being able to put a lot of effort into possibly making this event happen. I commend him for that. But the fact that Disney and ESPN, his higher ups, the two organizations that he has to listen to, Dana White always goes on about, no one can tell me what I can do, man. I do it. No one bosses me around. If someone doesn't believe in me, then they can F off because I believe in me. The only person who's responsible for this is me. Like, he's insulting everybody and anybody thinking he's on top of the moon. And then his two bosses came down. Like, a lot of people commented that Mickey Mouse is the only person who can step to Dana White. So Dana White's talking all this game about like, yeah man, I got this down. Then Mickey Mouse comes out and tells him, no, it's not gonna happen. And Dana White like concedes. It's a hilarious image to put in your own head. So coming up right after the break here, we'll be coming back here with some more MMA news. You're listening to the GSMC MMA podcast.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts. Past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
And so a lot of fighters reacted to UFC 249 being cancelled. One person who I felt really sad about was Justin Gaethje, because Justin Gaethje had everything going for him in this UFC 249 event. If he loses, he can say, well, I only had a week and a half of prep time for this fight. So really, you weren't even seeing the best version of me, and I fought against the number 2 best fighter in the entire division. Justin Gaethje had that idea going on. He also could have made a lot more extra money through this one fight that he got prepped up for a week and a half. He could have easily got paid 6 figures for this fight, even though he didn't really plan for it like 2 weeks ago. Justin Gaethje, if he were to defeat against Tony Ferguson, he would be the interim champion, and then he would go and that'd buy him a ticket to fight against Khabib Nurmagomedov. And so the thing is, though, for Justin Gaethje, if he were to win or to lose this event, he will always be prepped up in a positive light. If he loses, he lost not being prepped up, and it was unfair for him to even kind of lose, considering the fact that he only had a week and a half to prep up. And also, if he wins, then that buys him a title shot. No matter what, though, he's being placed in a limelight that will give him more opportunities to possibly make more money in future fights, and also put him in positive good graces with Dana White and the UFC executives. So Justin Gaethje had everything going for him. He had everything. And then this fight got cancelled, which is really sad. So Gaethje responded to this via Twitter that, I really felt a surge of energy and support as this fight was building up from so many people across the world. It was very humbling. I am thankful to represent Safford, Arizona, and my great friends and my family. I am going to be working hard to be ready next time the opportunity arises. Let's get through this fight we are all facing right now by having a positive impact on our immediate surroundings. Family, neighbor, community, thank you. He does the emoji where 2 hands are being clasped. The boss, Dana White, is someone I am proud to do so business with hashtag UFC249. So, sad for Justin Gaethje there. That was a huge opportunity that was, that sadly was taken away from him. Another fighter that's reacting to UFC 249 is Tony Ferguson, who based on his interviews is saying that he is still training as if UFC 249 is still happening. He's still cutting weight, and he's still actively training. He's still participating in his gym. He's not, well, a lot of fighters, I think what Dana White said is that, you know what, Dana White goes back and forth all the time, like what his opinion is on the coronavirus. But he says, like, you know what, this could actually be kind of a blessing, and that some fighters can take this as a time to go and spend time with their family, or to relax, or to take time off the gym. And then Tony Ferguson immediately after this responds like, hey man, I'm still at the gym. I'm still working out. While you have some fighters like Israel Adesanya who openly admitted that he's like 250% in the gym. He's like, 50% of the time I'm in the gym and I'm doing light workouts. If I'm not doing that, then I'm like watching anime or I'm watching TV. But I'm basically 50% ready to fight again. That's what Israel Adesanya is saying. So I find it funny that Tony Ferguson, Jorge Masvidal, and Kamaru Usman are still, and Colby Covington and Tyron Woodley. A part of it could be just them playing a character where they're like, hey man, I'm free to fight anytime. I'm free to fight even today or tonight or tomorrow. I don't really think so. It's not the smartest of ideas, but it's still funny that we got some fighters like Israel Adesanya, who's like putting his guard down, like, yeah, man, I'm like 50% ready. If you told me I'm going to fight somebody, I need some time to like prep up against them. And then you have like Kumar Usman, Jorge Masvidal, and like Colby Covington. Like, you know what? I'm ready anytime. I'm ready like in the next 2 hours. Kind of funny. So Nico Price has a short video here on our Twitter. It's not really her. It's from a movie where somebody is crying in I think it's in a funeral or a wedding reception. Kind of funny that. She's taking it with some humor at least. We got Bilal Muhammad here saying here, I trained 3 times a day wherever I could, dieted hard while stuck in quarantine, lost my opponent, said yes to whoever else they could find, put my health on the line knowing there was a chance it wouldn't happen because I love what I do, I'm a fighter. If you are celebrating this, then F you. He says F you with EF space U. Shake my head, SMH, the weaklings won. Yeah, I'm sorry, but like babies and the elderly are not doing well for themselves. Yeah, they might be physically weak, but they're still people, guys, darn it. Ray Borg had made a tweet out also, a pretty long tweet kind of, where it says, no, actually, it's him responding to Dana White. So he says, thanks Dana White for going through hell and back to make this event happen. Also thanks to my man, Ali Abelaziz, I think he's the one who trains Khabib Nurmagomedov, for always providing me with opportunities to provide for my family. So I think this, so there's a quote here that says, I was ready to take a risk to support my family and give the fans stuck at home something to watch. They could have made me stay in California quarantined after the fight, and I wouldn't have cared as long as my family was taken care of. I had to pay an ophthalmologist extra to give me an eye exam under the table for this event, and was about to drive 3 hours out of town for my medicals. We all have mouths to feed, and I can't thank Dana White enough for giving myself and the other fighters this card the opportunity to step up and let me provide for our families. To all the turds who didn't think and then like it kind of like drones off for him, like repeating, but it basically goes off to saying, you know what, F you guys. Another fight that I was really excited for was Rose Namajunas versus Andrade. Now, it's still not known what Rose Namajunas did or what she had or what was the reasoning behind Rose being pulled out of the fight. We got some people saying that she chose to pull out the fight. We got some other news sources saying that she was forced to pull out of the fight. And considering that there is absolutely zero news coming out from the camp of Rose Namajunas, we can only speculate. Is it because she wasn't ready for the fight? Is it because she was afraid of the COVID-19 issue? Was it because she had COVID-19? Was it because someone in her family had COVID-19? And she's like, you know what, I don't want to fight. It's a very big issue. We don't know what's going on from her side of the camp. Meanwhile, during Jessica Andrade's side of the camp, she was all prepped up, man. She converted, there's an entire, I think there's 10 to 12 minute video about it, on how she converted her own house as a gym. And then there's this organized plan of working out through her own home gym, through her coach, through her coaches, I think through like FaceTime or Skype or from Zoom. Like, there was a way for her to consistently and to do her gym and her training at home, and she prepped up for it though. She goes a lot of in depth into it. Go put up Jessica Andrade home gym on YouTube or anywhere on the internet, and you're gonna see how much effort she put in to making sure this is all good. But here's but Jessica Andrade, she's looking at it with some positives here, because she put out here Cancelado, and then she put a lot of sad emojis. So she puts at UFC Cancelado with a sad emoji. Then she says, okay, McDonald's, hashtag at McDonald's, with a lot of like emojis of like her like smiling and like winking, and then her like doing the happy cry emoji. And then she posts an image of herself and her team carrying these gigantic, humongous bags of McDonald's. Like, it has to be well more than 10 cheeseburgers for each bag, because I'm looking at this right now. This bag of McDonald's is so huge that it takes up two of her partners' entire upper torso. It is that huge. I guess with weight cutting pretty much being over with, I mean, there's no point in weight cutting for a fight that's not going to happen. And considering the fact that UFC technically is closed, according to UFC, I guess these fighters can indulge themselves and be like, you know what? I feel like drinking milk. I feel like eating junk food. You know what? I went through hell going through this training camp, going through weight cutting, prepping up for a fight. Now I know that my fight's not even going to happen. And also, I just lost money in the bank, considering the fact that I don't know for sure if I'm even going to be paid for this. Dana White says that these fighters will be paid. Will they be paid of their full, like, guaranteed contract? I don't know. But now I can see a lot of these fighters, like, from I see just Andrade, just trying to feel good about herself, trying to eat all this junk food, because she's like, you know what? I went through so much nonsense right now in the past several months that I just want to relax. I just want to eat my McDonald's. I just want to chill. Happens to me. It happens to me also. It happens to generally everybody. What do you think? There's a lot of, like, people who work through construction or work their blue collar job. They always go to, like, Carl's Jr. or McDonald's or Burger King or somewhere that's really unhealthy, because they're like, you know what? I went through hell doing this job that I don't really enjoy myself doing all that much. That was not fun or fulfilling. So I'm gonna go out there, I'm gonna mess up my body, I'm gonna eat all this junk food that tastes really, really well, because you know what? I deserve it. I feel like I deserve it, and I need to be happy at this moment. That's how I see it. And Ali Andrade, she's coming into this with a smile at the very least. So, after the short break here, we'll be coming back to you with some more MMA news here at the GSMC MMA Podcast.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
And we are back. I am your host, Arnaldo De Leon. You are listening to the GSMC MMA Podcast, and we got here a challenge. This headline here with ambitious girl Amanda Ribas aims to join UFC strawweight title mix this year. This coming in from MMAJunkie.usatoday.com, and that Amanda Ribas is happy taking the slow and steady approach as she pursues UFC glory. Ribas 9-1 in the MMA and 3-0 in UFC has already managed to make a name for herself in the strawweight division. She's picked up impressive wins over Randa Marcos, Mackenzie Dern, and Emily Whitmire, and now the Brazilian's targeting a showdown with Paige Van Zandt. At just 26, Ribas does not feel the need to skip steps as she tries to become champion. She wants to earn everything that comes her way, and said patience will be a virtue in her long-term success. I think when we rush, we put ourselves too far ahead, Ribas told MMA Junkie. I think we need to go a little by little to get what we want. Sometimes my dad and my coach say, calm down, relax, train, everything happens at the right time. Ribas number 14 in the latest USA Today Sports MMA Junkie strawweight rankings might be patient, but she also attempts to look at her career from a realistic perspective. If Ribas gets her desired matchup with Paige Van Zandt and wins, she'll be 4-0 in the octagon and in position for a big fight. After that's possible, a title eliminator wouldn't be far ahead. Although the trajectory for every fighter's career has been altered by UFC indefinitely suspending its events scheduled due to the coronavirus pandemic, Ribas remains optimistic she could elevate her career into title shot territory within 2020. I think I'm an ambitious girl, she said. So I think at the end of this year or the beginning of next year, Ribas said, I need more fights. I know that. Not just for the rankings, but for me. I need more experience with the UFC, with the fans, and maybe by the end of this year or the beginning of next year, I will be a title contender. So we're talking about here Amanda Ribas challenging, but she also challenges Paige Van Zandt into Fight Island. So although UFC 249 is canceled, and every other event for UFC 249 has been for UFC in the general sense has been canceled. We had the events, the Fight Night events and the Fight Nights on ESPN events that were supposed to happen the following weeks right after the UFC 249 were also canceled. And so, where does this lead future UFC events? Well, Dana White in his interview with ESPN MMA did say that they are currently working on fight cards For the fight island, Dana White possibly rented. He either rented or he bought an island. Chances are he probably rented. He rented an island that he would then go use. They are currently building a facility primarily for just mixed martial arts in that island. So they're gonna go and hope to have just international fights happen in that island. But so far right now, according to Dana White, there will be no fights that are going to happen within the States. And so the only chance we're ever going to see any sort of mixed martial arts or any UFC events will be in Fight Island. Now, initially, he said it would just be international fighters. And then when he was asked, this was I think a couple days ago, when he was asked by ESPN MMA, will there be international fighters fighting against US fighters in Fight Island? And Dana White said, we are thinking about it. We are considering it right now. It will happen in the future, but we're just thinking about international fighters and U.S. fighters being split up in two different locations. Now we have Amanda Ribas versus Paige Van Zandt being a possible fight that could happen in the island, and it's implied here that we are going to have an international fighter versus a U.S. fighter. And according to Dana White, though, he is still unsure of whether or not that's going to happen because, international flights and people traveling in and out of the States, it's very difficult to organize this event here. So Ribas is challenging Paige Van Zandt, which means Ribas might probably travel from Brazil into the island, and we have Van Zandt flying in from the States to the island here. We're not really sure of how international flights are going to happen within the next couple months. If Fight Island were to be completed in roughly around 2 months' time, it's hard to gauge whether or not those events. It's difficult whether to gauge or not. Like, we'll have fighters who will be perfectly fine having an event like that, participating in an event like that, because we at least here in the States, the current issue of COVID-19 is getting increasingly bigger and bigger. The date to which social distancing was supposed to end, it keeps on continuing by a month, by another month, by 2 months. That it's hard to gauge where, when and where social distancing is going to end, and how other countries are handling their airport security and how they're handling international traveling. And so, will Amanda Ribas versus Paige Van Zandt happen? We're just unsure. We really are unsure. Now, if these two were to fight, it would be a great fight for Paige Van Zandt to go participate in, because I don't think Paige Van Zandt is even ranked. If Van Zandt is ranked, I think Van Zandt, she lost 2 of her last 3 fights. She won her last recent fight, which is good for her. But Paige Van Zandt has always been a very controversial figure in the world of mixed martial arts, and the fact that she's got all the tools to be a superstar and to be a big name. And she is a much more bigger name than a lot of fighters who are currently even ranked. She's in the same category as Sage Northcutt in the fact that you look like the perfect fighter that the UFC wants to build an entire division around. You look like the perfect fighter that they want to send out, for a press conference or to do some news or to do some marketing for the UFC. Ever since Ronda Rousey left, they're trying to look for the next big name superstar. And although Amanda Nunes, Joanna Jędrzejczyk, Rose Namajunas, and Chris Cyber, even though all those fighters are big superstars, the image that those fighters represent is not the image that a Sage Northcutt and a Paige Van Zandt would do. And so Van Zandt, who I don't think even is ranked, this is a huge opportunity for her. If she were to say yes against Amanda Ribas, this would be big, because Ribas right now, Van Zandt would come into the fight as the underdog, because for Ribas right now, she's on a huge win streak right now, and with Paige Van Zandt. Okay, so if you guys don't know, Paige Van Zandt just went through a recent controversy yet again, in the fact that on her Instagram she posted some nudes of herself. And she posted out some nudes of herself. And considering that Paige Van Zandt is, she's always on the news, and whether she's trying to be political, or she's trying to send a statement out there, or try to send a message out there about feminism, about workplace culture, about man versus woman, about the amount of money that she makes within the UFC versus how much money she makes as a model. Paige Van Zandt's priorities has always never been just primarily mixed martial arts. Paige Van Zandt's like character is always based on the idea that she's like a model, like she's a model, she's a social media person, she's an entrepreneur, she's all this stuff, and she just so happens to be an MMA fighter in the largest mixed martial arts organization in the world. That's Paige Van Zandt, like in a nutshell. Kind of like Stacey Northcutt. It's like, oh, Stacey Northcutt, he's a super good looking guy. He's a model. Like he's a model. He's just like Texas. I think he's in Texas A&M. Is trying to study engineering. So he's smart. He's handsome. He's tall. He's good looking. He knows karate, and he just so happens to be an MMA fighter. So Northcutt, things aren't going well for Northcutt right now. Paige Van Zandt, I say that she has to agree to this fight against Amanda Ribas, and depending on how she feels about the whole COVID-19 issue, if she really feels that, oh man, dude, I don't want my health to be in jeopardy, I'm gonna just stay here in the States, and I refuse to fight against Amanda Ribas in this island that I have no clue where it's even at so far. If Paige Van Zandt says no, it's completely understandable. Amanda Ribas, I don't think a fight with Van Zandt is the best option, really. I really don't think so. I understand why she'd pick Van Zandt, in that she's really popular, and she's not really a tough fighter for you to go against. And considering that Van Zandt has name notoriety despite not having the best mixed martial arts record, pretty much gives Ribas a really good situation that's going to take her out of like the prelims, because Paige Van Zandt always appears in the main card. She's like, most of the time, she always appears in the main card, sometimes even in the co-main event. She was supposed to be in a co-main event. If the COVID-19 issue wasn't a thing, she was supposed to be prepped up for a co-main event fight sometime in the future. And so Ribas is like, okay, you know what? I need to be popular enough to go and be able to challenge top contenders, because I'm number 14th rank. I can't do so right now. Let me defeat Paige Van Zandt, this fighter that I know I can beat and is very popular. That's gonna put me in a good situation for me to challenge another fighter that's gonna propel me up higher in the rankings. So you're listening to the GSMC MMA podcast, and we'll be coming back right after the break.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
And we are back. So we've been discussing about Fight Island being a real thing. If you listen to the Joe Rogan podcast, when he was talking about with Brendan Schaub, they're just laughing their butt about it. Everyone's laughing about it. They're comparing it to Fire Festival. And the fact that there's going to be an entire island dedicated to just mixed martial arts is a hilarious concept if you think about it. I commend Dana White for being able to think of an idea, or whoever's idea was. I commend the person whose idea it is to think of, yeah, we're going to have an island dedicated to people who are going to fight each other. It's going to be like, it's something straight out of some 90s action movie. If you ever saw the movie Bloodsport or Mortal Kombat, where you got these fighters from all around the world, they go in a mysterious boat and they travel in this island that nobody has ever heard of, and they're going to fight to the death. Like, it is a ridiculous concept, and now that we're going to see this in real life, is just absolutely ridiculous. There's a lot of fake martial artists who throw this story around, where they're like, yeah man, I participated in Death Tournament Cup number 29, where I went to this boat and went to this island of the most dangerous, like, people in the world with billionaires all fighting. Like, there's Yakuza in this Fight Island. It's just like, we've heard about Fight Island before the UFC, and we've always imagined it as this, like, fictitious island from some action movie. Now that's gonna be a real thing now. People, including me, are still trying to comprehend that this actually happened, or it's actually a real thing. And so, while Ribas is challenging Paige Van Zandt to Fight Island. UFC bantamweight Brian Keller ponders whether Fight Island is right for him. The plane ride from, this coming in from MMAfighting.com, the plane ride home from UFC 246 wasn't a fun one for Brian Keller. Packed in a tube with other travelers, tens of thousands of feet above sea level, Keller started to feel sick. By the time he settled at home in Selden, New York, he had a cough and 103 degree fever. I'm thinking maybe I had the coronavirus before they named it, Keller told the A-side. He never found out officially, but as bad as the timing was, it turned out to be one of the better ones for the UFC fighter. Keller won his fight submitting Odie Osborne via first-round guillotine choke and snapped a 2-fight skid. He even picked up a $50,000 Performance of the Night bonus. This left him with a nice padding when the promotion's entire schedule ground to a halt 2 months later as the coronavirus outbreak became a pandemic and life changed for millions of people around the world. I remember Adesanya was talking about this, and also Cormier was like, no, I think it's just Adesanya. So Adesanya was talking about, oh my god, I am so lucky that I was able to have my fight happen right before this entire pandemic thing became an issue. Oh man, dude, I am blessed. People may not like that fight with me and Yoel Romero, but at least I actually made my money and I fulfilled my fight obligations for the year of 2020. I am happy. So good for Adesanya. So I guess that's kind of karma if you think about it. Is Adesanya. Yeah, I had probably the worst fight ever, but guess what? I was able to make my money, unlike all the other UFC fighters, for 2020. Alright, I'm good. So for many UFC fighters, especially the ones who were scheduled to compete on the ill-fated cards, which was UFC 249, that meant weeks of uncertainty as the promotion tried to proceed as usual. In the case of UFC 249, there's only 1 week until showtime until the plug was pulled by request of the promotion's broadcast partner, ESPN, and the reported request of California Governor Gavin Newsom. I honestly thought it was going to go down with the way things were going down about a week ago with the way UFC President Dana White was acting. Keller said he seemed confident. You can tell with him. I feel for the fighters that were on the card, that were cutting weight in that process where they are getting ready to fight someone, and then they've got to deal with when am I going to fight now? Keller is trying to figure out that right now, but the answer is less pressing. Of course, he'd like to make money, but the issue of commitment stays prevalent. It's been a stressful time, I can't lie, he said. We're trying to stay in shape, and we're trying to figure out when will I fight next. Should I try to stay ready in case the Fight Island comes about? It's a really confusing time, so it's hard to know what's coming ahead. After announcing the indefinite postponement of the April 18 pay-per-view and subsequent events, White offered a carrot to adrift fighters by promising to follow through on the audacious plan to promote events on a private international island. He said participants could fly to the island 1 month prior to train in virtual isolation before stepping to the cage. He did not say what would happen after that. Would Keller bite if he got called up to the island? Fighting is such a selfish sport, he said. We're used to being selfish with this, but at this moment, you've got to take yourself back and look at the big picture. With me, I've got my parents here, and I think that's my main focus. It would be selfish for me to go into the gym and get some training partners together and really prepare for a fight and take the risk of me getting sick. He says he might not be aware of it because COVID-19 has the issue in that you might not have any symptoms, you might have any symptom, but you might still have it in your body. And he's afraid that he's going to pass it on to his parents. He says, I don't want to pass it on to my parents. And then you've got to deal with the guilt of what happens if you got someone else sick. That's my main fear. But at the same time, he doesn't outright dismiss the idea. At one point, I look at this as my job. You're going to tell me I can't go to work, he said. But then the other side, I'm like, I fought in January. I'm okay money-wise. I have a lot of money saved. But some people aren't. They're desperate to fight for money, to feed their kids. How are you going to tell them, don't fight? In the end, Keller's position might be decided simply to where he landed on the UFC's 2020 schedule. He said he could hold off until the end of the year and survive financially. Whether he want to is another matter. The U.S. is less than 1 month into quarantine that's testing the patience of everyone. To say nothing of professional fighters who are trained to run the end. Right now, he's in his parents' house and getting to work on his Netflix queue. Give him a minute to figure things out. And Keller is in the same position as everyone else when it comes to Fight Island, really. Do they really want to compete in Fight Island, knowing that if they were to fly internationally and they're going to be interacting with a bunch of people in that island, because it's a private island, it doesn't have to It doesn't have to comply with any rulings on a government. Once again, I don't know where this island is. It's annoying that we don't know where this island is. We don't know who's overlooking this island. But since we have no clue on the procedures on what's happening for the fight island, all we know so far is Dana White saying, "Hey, there's gonna be a fight island. You can go there, you can fight, and you can go make some money." All right, then. Dana White is not saying, "Okay, I don't know the health procedures. I don't know if you guys can even make it back from the island. I'm not going to tell you who's going to be overlooking the event. I'm not going to tell you like what country or what state will be or what athletic commission will be watching over our event." Like there's such a huge question mark over Fight Island that Keller isn't in an understandable position. It's very understandable. I think it would be a great idea for Dana White, even though he doesn't like doing it. And that if he were to do a private call with these fighters, and he'd be like, "Hey, Keller, or Paige Van Zandt, or Ribas, or Masvidal, or Usman, tell me, do you have any questions about Fight Island? I can tell you, what's gonna happen. Just promise me that you're not gonna go tell, like, the social media or tell anyone else about this." I think Dana White is upset that Khabib Nurmagomedov in this whole ordeal pretty much on Instagram told, "Hey, it's kind of my fault, but it's also kind of the UFC's fault onto why UFC 249 is not happening, and it has to do with like them organizing and interacting with the fighters, telling them some stuff, and then going back at it and saying something else." I think Dana White's upset at Khabib, pretty much saying that UFC is partly to blame for UFC 249 not happening. And so, I think he's afraid of telling his fighters on the entire situation. He likes to keep it secret. Dana White has a history and has vocally talked about how he doesn't want his fighters to know everything, especially if it doesn't concern them. But it does concern them. Dana White should be a lot more open with his fighters, and his fighters should be a lot more trusting of him. They can go and talk about each other. They can go discuss how fights are going to be handled. They can discuss like the health procedures. They can discuss like how committed is the UFC and of the fighters that this will indeed happen and will not be shut down. There needs to be better communication overall throughout all members of UFC, whether you be Dana White, whether you be a fighter, whether you be even a nurse or a doctor, whether you be the match booker, whether you are the person doing commentary. There should be more discussions and more communication happening between all parties when it comes to UFC. Because even Joe Rogan, who is one of the most loyal members of the entire UFC, even he's in the dark. He doesn't know what to expect. Dana White says, "Oh, Joe Rogan, he's going to participate at UFC 249. Even though Joe Rogan says himself that he isn't going to do it. So, better communication would make the UFC a lot more better, and it would piss off a lot less fans and fighters. So, we'll be back here right after the short break. You're listening to the GSMC MMA Podcast.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
And we are back. So we've been discussing Fight Island, and so far with Fight Island being 2 months away from possibly being an official real thing from happening, we got fighters providing updates about themselves and their careers. So we got Khabib Nurmagomedov here. This is coming in from MMAfighting.com. That Khabib Nurmagomedov teases September return though doubtful of pandemic's end. UFC lightweight champion Khabib Nurmagomedov on Sunday indicated that he's looking at similar time frame for his octagon return, but he also questions whether the pandemic that canceled his long-awaited fight with Tony Ferguson will persist. On his official Instagram, Nurmagomedov posted a workout picture with him holding these gigantic gloves that are insanely huge, bigger than anything else in his entire body. It looks cartoony, really, if you think about it. Nurmagomedov posted a workout picture and updated his fans on what might not be next for his career. Per social media platform, it's translated here that he wrote, "But until September, it's not too far, though it's hard to believe everything will end by September, but yet one serious person said that in the peaceful time, you have to prepare for war." So now Nurmagomedov, he's prepping for September, but he doubts it'll be in September, which is 5 months away, which is so difficult to think about. It's man. So Nurmagomedov predicts it might be September. The NBA predicts at the very least it might be in August, end of August. So we got a long way to come before this COVID-19 issue, until everything becomes stabilized for COVID-19. Meanwhile, Tony Ferguson, he's still in the gym, he's still working out, he's still being a madman, working out. Tony Ferguson's response to this whole UFC 249 thing being canceled is pretty much like, hey man, I'm ready for war also. I'm willing to fight anyone, anytime, even like next week. Kind of similar to Khabib, except while Khabib now, ever since he went to Russia, is like, you know what, I understand the issue now. It's very probable that this whole COVID-19 thing, which I didn't take all that seriously like a couple weeks ago, is a huge issue. I understand if my fight does get canceled. I understand that I'm training for something that might not even happen. I am very doubtful of what my career will be 5 months from now. At least Khabib can admit it. Ferguson is full on, you know what? I'm ready for anything. Let's go. So while those two are updated there, we got Jorge Masvidal and Kamaru Usman continue to beef. The fast-rising Jorge Masvidal is the number 3 contender to Kamaru Usman's welterweight title, and a matchup between the two for the belt is conceivable. The two have engaged in a war of words this year, and Masvidal added fuel to the fire in a recent interview with BT Sports when asked whether a bout with Usman would be the biggest fight of his career. He says, part of it, yes. Part of it, no. A fight is just more than the guy you have in front of you. It's also a moment. It will be fighting for the UFC title, so that's huge. But of the skill sets, no. This animal hunter has tamed much more ferocious animals and wild beasts than this mere insect in front of him. So as far as that goes, skill level goes, no. This individual will be tamed on that night. This matador will tame the wild animal, and with ease as well. Usman, who sports a 16-1 professional record, is riding a 15-match win streak. He's beaten Colby Covington and Tyron Woodley, who are respectively ranked number 1 and number 2 in the UFC's welterweight rankings. So Usman, without a doubt, will be the toughest fight for Masvidal. Yes, Usman not be the most popular fighter that Masvidal has faced. I would say Ben Askren and Nate Diaz hold more value than Kamaru Usman, even though they don't have the title, because those two fighters are really good at promoting themselves and trying to make themselves seem bigger than they actually are, and they make the storyline a lot more bigger, make the feuds a lot more grander. And so, Usman versus Jorge Masvidal, the betting odds favorite has to be Usman. It really does have to be. Because, it has to be, right? Usman is in the same category as Yoel Romero, in that they're two really, really good wrestlers. I genuinely believe that if Yoel Romero were to be more active in trying to take down Israel Adesanya, Yoel Romero would win the fight, without a doubt. And Usman, if Usman were to take down against Colby Covington, and although Covington is a really good wrestler, I believe Usman's wrestling ability is better than Covington. If he were to attempt a takedown, or at least try to do some wrestling on Covington instead of doing boxing, the fight would have not been as close. That fight was really close between Covington and Usman, and it shouldn't have been that close if Usman stuck towards a wrestling game plan. I remember a recent, there was a podcast with Joe Rogan and Eddie Bravo, and then Eddie Bravo says that trainers and coaches have the tendency of overhyping and giving overconfidence to their fighters if they're somewhat decent in boxing. So if you have a wrestler and your trainer or coach is like, "Hey man, you're a great wrestler, but your boxing is amazing, man. You can go defeat Muhammad Ali," looking at Ronda Rousey, then that fighter might gain overconfidence in their boxing, and it doesn't actually translate in a real fight. It just doesn't. And with Kamaru Usman, yes, he's a decent boxer here, but when I compare his striking ability versus Jorge Masvidal, it doesn't even come close. Masvidal wins in that category. So the betting odds favorite for that fight between Usman and Masvidal has to go for Usman if Usman tries to wrestle him. If Usman's trainers and coaches are smart, they'll tell Usman, "Hey Usman, I know you enjoy boxing. I know you had a good go-around against Colby Covington, who is one of the more better strikers in the entire division. But guess what? You have to stop with the striking and go for the wrestling. Alright? Don't box a guy who's known as a good boxer. Just don't do it. It logically doesn't make any sense. I know there's bragging rights for Usman if you were to outstrike against Masvidal. But it's not worth it. It's not worth it if you could possibly get knocked out. Because Covington, for as good as Covington is as a striker, he doesn't have like any punching power. Covington's striking game is based on the idea of tiring you out and attacking you with a higher volume of strikes. Just like Joanna Jędrzejczyk, she's beating like Covington and Joanna are beating you down through sheer volume and strike accuracy. Their entire thing is to wear you down. They're not there to knock you out. They just want to go and wear you down. That's why Joanna Jędrzejczyk and Colby Covington, they don't have any like highlight KOs because they don't. They mostly win by decision because that's their fighting style. They don't fight with power. They fight with like intelligence. And so, Usman, take down Masvidal. Seriously, it's a good idea. It really is. And then we have Colby Covington. His update, I talked about Covington and Joanna Jędrzejczyk. Those fighters, they fight really similarly despite the fact that they're beefing. But Covington wants to make the biggest splash possible into joining the WWE. Okay, so this is really funny here. So Colby Covington in a recent interview says that he wants to make wrestling great again through joining the WWE by 2021. This is 100% not going to happen. This is Covington. Okay, here's the thing. Okay, as one of the only MMA fans out, people who watches MMA and watches pro wrestling, not only watches pro wrestling, watches like independent wrestling and underground wrestling. I saw Covington's work in Impact Wrestling. I saw King Mo's work in pro wrestling. It's not happening. It is so okay. So Covington would make a really good manager. Okay, he would be that good like Paul Heyman-esque kind of like, I will talk my way into getting popular and getting over with the fans here. But trust me, Covington, man, considering how small he is and considering how small he looked when he was an Impact Wrestling, man, it's just not a foreseeable future. I just don't see it happening. I really don't at all. It's just, and that's not much of a dig on Colby Covington, but pro wrestling logic works very differently with like, pro wrestling logic is its own little like alien dimensional world. It doesn't make all that much sense. Like, if you were to have Goldberg appear, it logically makes sense for John Jones to defeat Goldberg in a fight. 100%, right? 100%. Conor McGregor, Colby Covington, and John Jones, and Daniel Cormier, they would destroy Bill Goldberg, and Undertaker, and Triple H, and Braun Strowman in a fight. We all know that. But pro wrestling logic dictates that they all lose, because they don't look like pro wrestlers. And if you don't look like pro wrestling logic dictates that the fighter who wins is the fighter that looks like a pro wrestler. That's how it is. That's how it's been for pro wrestling. And Colby Covington just doesn't fit the bill. He just really doesn't. And so after the short break here, I will test your overall knowledge of mixed martial arts here at the GSMC MMA podcast.
Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The latest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal to take England all the way to the World Cup finals.
Listen now.
And welcome back. So, how much do you know about the UFC? Well, can you name the longest reigning UFC champions in each division? Starting up from heavyweight down to the strawweight women's division. So, do you know, this quiz here, I found it, it was, last updated July 28th, 2016, and I updated it so it fits into the new fighters who have broken the records in the past 4 years. So, can you name the longest reigning UFC champions in each division? Well, let's go. Heavyweight division, who is the longest reigning heavyweight champion of all time? Is it Junior Dos Santos? No, even if Junior Dos Santos is up there, I think he's the second all time here. And the answer would be Cain Velasquez. But with Cain Velasquez, it's very interesting though. Cain Velasquez has a huge asterisk into his title reign. I wouldn't call it the most dominant title reign ever for a heavyweight champion. I would say Stipe Miocic, because for Cain Velasquez, here's the thing about Cain Velasquez. There's a period in time to which Cain was a champion for 2 years. For 2 years, actually for well over 2 years, he was champion for well over 1,000 days, and in that 1,000-day reign, he defended the belt only 2 times. And so, Cain Velasquez, he was champion for over 2 years, defended the belt only 2 times, and it's because, okay, so this was, Cain Velasquez's run as champion came before the huge surge of interim titles being a huge thing within the UFC. So, Velasquez was heavyweight champion for a long time, and during that 2.5 year, almost 3 year span, instead of having interim heavyweight champions, we instead were having fighters battle it out for the normal contendership in order to go challenge Cain Velasquez. So, yeah, Cain Velasquez, he was champion for a very long time, but during his run as champion, it wasn't really all that dominant. He fought for a very short amount of time. That you have to look at Cain Velasquez's run as the heavyweight champion with an asterisk behind it. So who is the longest reigning light heavyweight champion of all time? Easy. John Jones. I can't really think of any other. I can think of who are my favorite light heavyweight champions of all time. I can say that Mauricio Shogun Rua is my favorite light heavyweight competitor of all time. You can say Chuck Liddell is probably the most famous or most popular light heavyweight champion of all time. But if you're to say who is the longest reigning, you have to go for John Jones, and also who is probably the greatest champion in light heavyweight history. Without a doubt, it's John Jones. Yes, whatever your opinion of him is outside of the UFC, what he's able to accomplish within the UFC makes him, without a doubt, the most dominant light heavyweight champion of all time. Maybe arguably the most dominant UFC champion of all time. And now we have here middleweight. Who is the longest reigning UFC champion in the middleweight division? Without a doubt, easily, Anderson Silva. It's not Chris Weidman, it's not Luke Rockhold. Here's the thing, if Anderson Silva took Chris Weidman a lot more seriously, then Anderson Silva should have easily defeated Weidman. Weidman, in my opinion, has to go down as one of the worst UFC champions of all time, considering the fact that his title fights have huge asterisks around it. I know, yeah, it's probably to blame Anderson Silva. And that, like, the reason why Anderson Silva lost against Chris Weidman was not because Weidman was the better fighter. I say Anderson Silva mentally came to the fight pretty much checked out. Yes, Weidman, like, in his credentials says, yeah, he defeated against Anderson Silva. And my friends and family who don't watch UFC or mixed martial arts, when he saw, so my friend, he doesn't know anything about Anderson Silva. He doesn't know anything about Chris Weidman. But when he looked up the news and saw Anderson Silva lose to Chris Weidman, he interpreted it as, oh wow, Chris Weidman destroyed Anderson Silva, man. He dominated him. It said he knocked him out. And if you actually watch the fight between Silva and Weidman, we didn't see the best version of Silva in that fight. Not only that, we saw a version of Anderson Silva that looked like how Tyron Woodley looked like when he fought against Kamaru Usman, and the fact that he wasn't really all that engaged with the fight. And so it kind of saddens me that, like, my friend is like, yeah, man, Chris Weidman, who now watches UFC, yeah, Chris Weidman, he defeated Anderson Silva because Weidman was the better fighter. Not really. It's because Anderson Silva was pretty much checked out in that fight, and that is Anderson Silva's fault. But when you look at Weidman's, if you look at Weidman's career after that first fight against Anderson Silva, and you really analyze all his fights that Weidman has had, Weidman has to go down as one of the worst champions in the middleweight division history, without a doubt. I'm not knocking on Chris Weidman. I'm just saying that Weidman got propelled up in a certain status, in a certain tier, when he shouldn't have been. So who is the longest reigning UFC champion for the welterweight division? Without a doubt, easily, George St. Pierre. There's no one in the welterweight division. There are a lot of fighters in the welterweight division that are very popular right now, like Kamaru Usman. But you don't think, but I say longest reigning, I don't think Usman's gonna hold the belt that long compared to GSP, considering that GSP literally has all the tools. There's not a single hole in GSP's game. And when you look at the people who are competing for the welterweight title right now, whether it be Covington, whether it be Masvidal, whether it be Nate Diaz, whether it be Usman, they all have holes in their game that if their opponent were to take advantage of, they'd lose. But for GSP though, he pretty much has no holes in his game, and you just have to outdo him in every aspect of the fight game. And it sucks that Johnny Hendricks wasn't able to accomplish that. He was the closest one to ever do it. But GSP, without a doubt, longest reigning UFC champion in the division, in the welterweight division. Longest reigning lightweight champion, BJ Penn, and Khabib Nurmagomedov. If he were to hold on to this title, which he likely will for the next, I think, year and a half, he will then pass BJ Penn. I think would he pass BJ Penn? Wait, let me look at Khabib Nurmagomedov. How close is he to passing BJ Penn in the rankings so far for the year? And then so Khabib Nurmagomedov, he is currently at 732 days right now in his reign as the lightweight champion. BJ Penn is the longest reigning champion of all time, being at 812 days. And so, that's not very interesting. So, okay. So BJ Penn, he had defended his belt 3 times in the span of his 800-day reign as champion. Khabib Nurmagomedov was supposed to defend his belt against Tony Ferguson, but because that's not going to happen, and if it is true that he is going to go and fight possibly in September when the COVID-19 issue dies down, then Khabib Nurmagomedov will end up surpassing BJ Penn in the longest ever title reign, and will also be tied with BJ Penn with most title defenses in the lightweight division. So Khabib Nurmagomedov by September will cement his place as the best ever in the lightweight division. So longest reigning lightweight champion, featherweight champion, Jose Aldo. Yes, it's sad that people know Jose Aldo just for the fight against Conor McGregor, but that's pretty much that's pretty much it. Longest reigning bantamweight champion. It was supposed to be TJ Dillashaw. It really was, but TJ Dillashaw has a huge asterisk behind him ever since his fight with Henry Cejudo, to which he was caught by USADA. So, longest reigning bantamweight champion right now is TJ Dillashaw, but it comes with an asterisk. Longest flyweight champion of all time? Easy. Demetrius Johnson defended the belt 11 times. Longest reigning bantamweight women's champion. Now, I thought it was Ronda Rousey. It was Ronda Rousey for the longest time. But as of right now, it is currently Amanda Nunes. And with how Amanda Nunes is going for right now in her career, she might be the greatest UFC women's champion of all time. I think she's at that moment right now where she is the greatest UFC women's champion of all time. She might not be the most popular women's champion of all time, but she's without a doubt the most dominant women's champion of all time throughout all women's divisions. And then I got here, who is the longest reigning UFC strawweight women's champion? It's Joanna Jędrzejczyk. Joanna Jędrzejczyk calls herself the queen for a reason. It's because she was so dominant in the strawweight division. And considering how stacked the strawweight division is right now, currently in the UFC, it's very probable that if Joanna Jędrzejczyk were to somehow win back her belt against Weili Zhang, and she was able to defeat all the people who are ranked in the top 6 of the strawweight women's division, Joanna Jędrzejczyk will continue to stake her claim as being the best ever women's strawweight champion of all time. And here's the thing: if Joanna Jędrzejczyk were to get back her belt, she might compete with Amanda Nunes as possibly being the greatest women's champion of all time. Because as of right now, it's either Joanna Jędrzejczyk. No, here's the. Who are the greatest women's champions of all time? You'll say it's either Ronda Rousey, Amanda Nunes, Chris Cyborg, or Joanna Jędrzejczyk. And Nunes and Joanna Jędrzejczyk, they're still, I think, in their early 30s, so they still have a long ways to go before their career is over. And so we'll see how both of them end up in the overall rankings. But to me right now, those two are the 2 greatest women's champions in the history of the UFC. And so thank you for listening to the GSMC MMA podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'd like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review. That really helps out. Also, if you please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you, and have a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts MMA Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.